Hello everyone and welcome back to Monsters of the Mind. As always, I'm your host Mr.G. Today we're taking a foray into Norse mythology, the mythology written by the Vikings. And today we're looking at 3 monsters from Norse mythology, all of which are siblings. We'll be looking at Jormungandr, Schlipner, and Fenrir. Jormungandr means huge monster, and he was an individual. He was malevolent, he was all around the world, and he comes from Norse mythology. Jormungandr is an absolutely gigantic snake, described as being so big that he wraps around the edges of the earth. Keep in mind that the Vikings were flat earthers, and this was before the Americas were discovered, so that's not as big as you might think. Anyway, Jormungandr was the son of Loki and the giantess Angrboda. And when he was young, he was tossed into the sea, causing him to reach his massive size. Jormungandr is also notable for his rivalry with the thunder god Thor. Why Thor hated the snake so much, I wasn't able to find an explanation. Anyway, one of Jormungandr's most notable stories tells of the time that Thor and a giant went fishing with an ox head, catching the serpent on the line. Thor was about to kill the snake, but the giant he was with got so scared that he cut the line, sending Jormungandr back into the seas. It's said that during Ragnarok, Thor and Jormungandr will end up killing each other. Meanwhile, Schlipner means slippy, or slippery, things like that. He was also an individual. He was pretty benevolent. He lived with the gods in Asgard, and he comes from Norse mythology. Schlipner was an 8-legged horse, and the son of Loki and a horse that Loki mated with when he disguised himself as a mare. Schlipner is described as being the greatest horse who ever lived, and is thought to have been the fastest thing in the land. He is also the personal steed of the leader of the Norse gods Odin, and much like how Cerberus is the only good child of Typhon and Echidna, Schlipner is often considered to be the only good child of Loki. Schlipner's most prominent story is when he was ridden down to the underworld in order to revive the dead god Balder, but unfortunately this was a failed mission, as they couldn't meet the requirements due to Loki's intervention. Finally, Fenrir means fen dweller. If you don't know, a fen is a term for a swamp that's full of peat moss. He was an individual, he was malevolent, he lives on the island of Lyngvi, and he also comes from Norse mythology. Fenrir is described as being a giant wolf that never stops growing. Fenrir is yet another child of Loki and Angrboda. Fenrir was at a young age prophesied to be a very dangerous monster someday. In order to prevent this, the gods tried tying him up, but he ended up breaking out of everything they tried to hold him down with, so they had the dwarves make a chain out of ingredients that were unbreakable, such as the sound of a cat's footstep, a woman's beard, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, a bear's sinews, and bird saliva. This story is often used to explain why none of those things exist. Although, obviously fish breathe, birds do have salivary glands, and anyone can grow a beard if they have a high enough testosterone level. However, Fenrir knew this was a trick, and he told the gods that in order to prove this wasn't a trap, someone had to put his hands in his mouth, while he tried the chains on. Obviously, it was a trap, and he ended up biting the hand off the god Tyr. It's said that during Ragnarok, Fenrir will be freed and will get so big he will devour the sun and moon before killing Odin, only to be killed himself by one of Odin's sons. Now here's Vincent. I've encountered Jormungandr a few times. I've bumped into his body, but I don't think I've ever seen his head. For Schlipner, I've only had brief glimpses of him when he's flying through the sky with Odin. And for Fenrir, I've never actually encountered him, but from what I hear, Cerberus likes to go to him and laugh at him. Now let's look at the cards. The name translation here is wrong. Jormungandr means giant monster, but here it claims it means giant stick. This card also claims that Jormungandr was hated by Thor because he was once disguised as a cat. That is kind of a gross exaggeration of the things that happened. You see, Thor once went to this place owned by a guy named Loki, and he used illusions to make Thor fail at tasks. One of them was to lift up a cat, but he was only able to lift up one leg, and later on, Loki revealed that this wasn't a cat, but rather an illusionary disguise for Jormungandr. But here it seems to be implying that Jormungandr was the one who disguised himself as a cat, even though he probably didn't agree to this stunt. Also, the design they used for Thor at the bottom story here looks almost a little too much like Marvel's version. I know Thor's a public domain character, but yeah. I give this card an 8 out of 10. Schlipner. Why are they trying to make him creepy? He was considered benevolent. Okay, I get the gray coloration, he's sometimes described as that, but what's with the foggy eyes? Also, it claims the runes on his teeth were responsible for his power, but in almost every myth I read, he just kinda has runes on his teeth and they don't really do anything, they're just kinda there. I still don't get why they're trying to make him creepy looking. Anyway, the only other error I can find on this card is that it claims that he's a psychopomp who brings souls to Valhalla, but I wasn't able to find a source for that claim. He also gets an 8 out of 10. Fenrir. Yeah, this is a pretty good card. I can't really find any errors here unlike the other two. 10 out of 10. Now let's look at these monsters in pop culture. All three of them have appeared in Marvel Comics Thor series at one point or another. Although so far only Fenrir has been in the MCU. Gormangund was planned to appear in Avengers Infinity War, but his scene was cut. Fenrir appears in an episode of Disney's Hercules the Animated Series and an episode talking about Norse mythology. He appears in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And he also appears in the mythology MMORPG Smite, along with Jormungandr. Jormungandr appears in God of War. And for Schlipner, he appeared in one of the Final Fantasy games. That's all for this episode of Monsters of the Mind. Join us next time when we talk about... Actually, I don't know how to describe the monster. Okay, bye.